Chapter 6. The Noble and Most Ancient House of Black. Mrs. Weasley followed them upstairs looking grim. I want you all to go straight to bed. No talking, she said as they reached the first landing. We have got a busy day tomorrow. I expect Guinea's sleep. She added to Hermione, so try not to wake her up. Sleep? Yes, right, said Fred in an undertone. After Hermione bade them good night and they were climbed to the next floor. If Ginny is not lying awake waiting for Hermione to tell her everything, they said downstairs. Then I am Flubberworm. All right, Ron, Harry, said Mrs. Weasley on the second landing, pointing them into their bedroom. Off to bed with you. Right. Harry and Ron said to the twins. Stop tight, said Fred, winking Mrs. Weasley closely. The door behind Harry with a sharp snap. Bedroom looked, if anything, even darker and gloomier than it had on first sight. The blank picture on the wall was now breathing very slowly and deeply, as though its invisible occupant was asleep. Harry put on his pajama, took off his glasses, and climbed into his chilly bed, while Ron threw Owl Treat up on top of the wardrobe to pacify Hedwig and Pigwidgeon, who were clattering around and rustling their wings restlessly. We can't let them out to hunt every night, Ron explained as he pulled on his maroon pajamas. Dumbledore doesn't want too many owls swooping around the square. Thinks he will look suspicious. Oh yeah, I forgot. Crossed to the door and bolted it. Are they doing that for Rachel? Said Ron as he turned off the light. First night I was here, he came wandering in the 3 in the morning. Trust me, you don't want to wake up and find him prowling around your room. Anyway, he got his bed, settled down under the covers, then turned to look at Harry in the darkness. Harry could see his outline by the moonlight filtering in through the grimy window. What do you reckon? Harry didn't need to ask what Ron meant. Well, they didn't tell us much. We couldn't have guessed, did they? He said, thinking on all that had been said downstairs. I mean, all they really said is that the order is trying to stop people joining war. There was a sharp intake of breath from Ron. Demort, said Harry firmly. When are you going to start using his name, Cyrus and Lupindo? Ron ignored the last comment. Yeah, you're right, he said. We already knew nearly everything told us from using the extendable ear. The only new bit was crack. Ouch. Your voice down, Ron. But Mom will be back up here. You two just appear on my knee. Yeah, well, it's harder in the dark. Harry saw the blurred outline of Fred and George leaping down from Ron's bed. There was a groan of wet spring, and Harry's mutter descended a few inches as George sat down near his foot. So, not there yet, said George eagerly. The weapon Cyrus mentioned, said Harry. Sleep more like, said Fred with relish. Now, sitting next to Ron, he didn't hear about that on the old extendable, did we? Do you reckon it is? Said Harry. Could be anything, said Fred, but there can't be anything worse than the Avada Kedavra curse, can there? Said Ron. What's worse than death? Maybe it's something that can kill lots of people at once, suggesting George. Maybe it's some particular painful way to killing people, said Ron fearfully. He got the Crusader's curse for causing pain, said Harry. He doesn't need anything more efficient than that. There was a pause, and Harry knew that the other, like him, were wondering what horror this weapon could perpetrate. So, who do you think got it now? Asked George. I hope it's our side, said Ron, sounding slightly nervous. If it is, Dumbledore's probably keeping it, said Fred. Where? Said Ron, quickly. Hogwarts. But it is, said George. That's where he hide the sorcerer's stone. A weapon's going to be a lot bigger than the stone though, said Ron. Necessarily, said Fred. Yeah, size is no guarantee for power, said George. Look at Guinea. What do you mean? Said Harry. We have never been on the receiving end of the hurt that boggy hexes. You, shh, said Fred, half rising from the bed. Listen. They fell silent. Footsteps were coming up the stair again. Mum, said George, and without further ado, there was a loud crack, and Harry felt the weight vanish from the end of his bed. A few seconds later, and they heard the floorboard crack outside their door. Mrs. Weasley was plainly listening to see whether they were talking or not. Hedwig and Pidwiggen hooted dolefully. The floorboard cracked again, and they heard her heading upstairs check on Fred and George. So, doesn't trust us at all, you know, said Ron regretfully. Harry was sure he would not be able to fall asleep. The evening had been so packed with things to think about that he fully expected to lie awake for hours mulling it all over. He wanted to continue talking to Ron, but Mrs. Weasley was now cracking back downstairs again, and once she had done, he distinctly heard others making their way upstairs. The fact many legged creatures were pattering softly up and down outside the bedroom door, and Hagrid, the care of magical creature teacher, was saying, "Beauties are they? Oh, Harry will be studying weapons this term." And Harry saw that the creatures had cannons for head and were willing to face him. He ducked. The next thing he knew, he was curled in a warm ball under his bedclothes, and George Lord's voice was filling the room. "Mum, say, get up. Your breakfast is in the kitchen." And then she needed you in the drawing room. There are lots more toxins than she thought, and she's found a nest of dead puffskin under the sofa. Half an hour later, Harry and Ron, who had dressed and breakfasted quickly, entered the drawing room, a long high ceiling room on the first floor with olive green walls covered in dirty tapestries. The carpet exhaled little cloud of dust every time some put their foot on it, and the long moss green velvet curtain were buzzing as though swarming with invisible beings. It was around this that Mrs. Weasley, Hermione, Ginny, Fred, and George were grouped, all looking rather particular as they had tied cloth over their noses and mouths. Each of them was also holding a large bottle of black liquid with a nozzle at the end. "Cover your faces and take a spray," Mrs. Weasley said to Harry and Ron the moment she saw them, pointing to two more bottles of black liquid standing on a spider-legged table. "It's doxycyde. I have never seen an infection this bad. What that house elf's been doing for last 10 years." Hermione's face was half concealed by the tea towel, but Harry distinctly saw her throw a reproachful look at Mrs. Weasley at this word. "Creature's really old. He probably couldn't manage." "You had to be surprised what creature can manage when they want to," Hermione said. Cyrus, who had just entered the room carrying a blood-stained bag of what appeared to be a dead rat. "I have just been feeding Buckbeak," he added in reply to Harry's inquiring look. "I keep him upstairs in my mother's bedroom anyway, this writing desk." He dropped the bag of rat onto an armchair, then bent over to examine the locked cabinet, which Harry now noticed for the first time was shaking slightly. "Well, Molly, I'm pretty sure this is a Bogart," said Cyrus, peering through the keyhole. "But perhaps we ought to let Mad Eye have a shiftee at it before we let it out." Knowing my mother, it could be something much worse. Right, you, Cyrus, said Mrs. Weasley. They were both speaking in carefully light, polite voices that Harry felt plainly that neither had forgot their disagreement of night before. A loud clenching bell sounded from downstairs, followed at once by the cacophony of screams, the wails that had been triggered the previous night by Tonks knocking over the umbrella stand. I keep telling them not to ring the doorbell, said Cyrus exasperatedly, hurrying back out of the room. They heard him thundering down the stairs as Mrs. Black's screech echoed up through the house once more. Stain of dishonor, 50 half-breed blood traitor, children of fifth. Close the door, please, Harry, said Mrs. Weasley. Harry took as much time as he dared to close the drawing room door. He wanted to listen to what was going on downstairs. Cyrus had obviously managed to shut the curtains over his mother's portrait because she had stopped screaming. He heard Cyrus walking down the hall. The, then the clattering of the chain on the front door, and then a deep voice he recognized as Kingsley Shacklebolt saying, Hestia just relieved me, so she's got Moody's clock now, though I had left a report of Dumbledore. Feeling Mrs. Weasley's eye on the back of his head, Harry regretfully closed the drawing room door and rejoined the Doxy party. Mrs. Weasley was bending over to check the page on Doxy's in Gilderoy Lockhart's Guide to Household Pests, which was lying open on the sofa. Right, you lot, you need to be careful because Doxys bite and their teeth are poisonous. I have got a bottle of antidote here, but I'm rather nobody needed it. She straightened up, positioned herself purely in front of the curtains, and beckoned them all forward. When I say the world starts spraying immediately, she said, they'll come flying out at us, I expect, but it's a on the spray. One good squirt will paralyze them. When they immobilize, just throw them in the bucket. She stepped carefully out of their line of fire and raised her own spray. All right, squirts, Harry had been spraying only a few seconds when a fully grown doxy came soaring out of a fold in the material shiny, blinking wings, whirling tiny needle sharp teeth bared its fear like body covered with thick black hair and its four tiny fists Bleached with fury, Harry caught it full in the faces with the blast of toxicide. It froze in the midair and fell with a surprise, loud tongue into the worn carpet below. Harry picked it up and threw it in the bucket. Fred, what are you doing? Said Mrs. Weasley sharply. Spray that at once and throw it away. Harry looked around. Fred was holding a struggling doxy between his forefinger and thumb. Right. Oh, Fred said brightly, spraying a doxy quickly in the face so that it fainted. But the moment Mrs. Weasley's back was turned, he pocketed it with a wink. We want to experiment with toxin for our givings snack boxes, George told Harry under his breath, deftly spraying two doxies at once as they soared straight for his nose. Harry moved closer to George and muttered out of the corner of his mouth, what are giving snakebox range of sweet to make you ill, George? Widespread, keeping a wary eye on Mrs. Weasley's back. Not seriously ill, mind, just ill enough to get you out of a class when you feel like it. Fred and I have been developing them this summer. They are double-ended, color-coded. Chew. If you eat the orange half of the pumpkin pastels, you throw up. Moment you have been rushed out of the lesson of the hospital wings, you swallow the purple half, which restored you to full fitness, enabling you to pursue the leisure activity of your own choice during an hour that would otherwise have been devoted to unprofitable boredom. That's what we are putting in the advance. Anyway, whispered Fred, who had edged over out of Mrs. Weasley's line of vision and was now sweeping a few stray doxies from the floor and adding them to his pocket. But they still need a bit of work at the moment. Our testers are having a bit of trouble stopping thinking long enough to swallow the purple in. Testers, us, said Fred. We take it in turn. George did the fainting passes. We both tried to explain Mom thought we had been dueling, said George. The sharp still on them. Harry muttered, pretending to be adjusting the nozzle on his spray. Well, we haven't had a chance to get premises yet, said Fred, dropping his voices even lower as Mrs. Weasley mopping her brow with her scarf before returning to the attack. So we are running it as a mail order service at the moment. We put advertisement in the Daily Prophet last week. All thanks to you, mate, said George. But don't worry, Mom hasn't got a clue. She won't read the Daily Prophet anymore cause of it telling lies about you and Dumbledore. Harry grinned. He had forced the Weasley twins to take the 1,000 gallons prize money he had won in the Triwizardy tournament to help them realize their ambition to open a joke shop, but he was still glazed to know that his person in furthering their plans was unknown to Mrs. Weasley, who did not think that running a joke shop was a suitable career for two of her sons. The desocking of the curtains took most of the morning. It was past midday when Mrs. Weasley finally removed her protective scarf, sank into the sagging armchair, and sprang up again with a cry of disgust. Having sat on a bag of dead rat, the curtains were no longer buzzing. They hung limp and down from the incentive spraying unconscious dogs like crammed in the bucket at the foot of them, beside a bowl of their black eggs, at which Crookshank had now sniffing and Fred and George were shooting conventuous look. I think we'll tackle those after lunch. Mrs. Weasley pointed at the dusk glassing front cabinet standing on either side of the mantelpiece. They were cramming with an old assortment of objects, a selection of rusty dagger claw, a coiled snakeskin, a number of tarnished silver boxes, increased with language Harry could not understand, and least pleasant of all, an ornate crystal bottle with a large opal set into the slow stopper, full of what Harry was quite sure was blood. The changing doorbell rang again. Everyone looked at Mrs. Weasley. Stay here, she said firmly, snatching up the bag of rat as Mrs. Black's screech started up again from down below. I'll bring up some sandwiches. She left the room, closing the door carefully behind her. At once everyone dashed over to the window to look down onto doorstep. They could see the top of unkempt gingerly head and a sack of precariously balanced cauldrons. Madam, said Hermione. She brought all those curtains for. Probably looking for a safe place to keep them, said Harry. Isn't that what he was doing the night he was supposed to be telling me? Picking up doggy cauldrons. Yeah, you're right, said Fred as the front door opened. Madame heaved his cauldron through it and disappeared from the view. Timmy, not like that. He and George crossed to the door and stood beside it listening intensely. Mrs. Black screaming had stopped again. Muddings is talking to Cyrus and Kingsley. Fred muttered, frowning with concentration. Can't hear probably. Do you reckon we can risk the extendable year? Might be worth, said George. I could sneak upstairs and get up here. But at the precise moment there was an explosion of sound from downstairs that rendered extendable ear quite unnecessary. All of them could hear exactly what Mrs. Weasley was shouting at the top of her voice. We are not running a hideout for stolen goods. I love hearing Mom shouting at someone else, said Fred with a satisfied smile on his face, and he opened the door an inch or so to allow Mrs. Weasley's voice to permeate the room better. It makes such a nice change. Completely irresponsible, as if we haven't got enough to worry about without you dragging stolen cartons into the house. The idiots are letting her get into her stride, and George shaking his head. You have got to head her off early, otherwise she built up a head of steam and goes on for hours, and she's been dying to have to go at Muddung's ever since she sneaked off when he was supposed to be following you. Harry, and there goes Cyrus' mum again. Mrs. Weasley's voice was lost amid fresh shrinking and scream from the portrait in the hall. George made to shut the door to drown the noise, but before he could do so, the house elf edged into the room, except for the 50 rag tied like a loincloth around its middle. It was completely naked. He looked at very old. Its skin seemed to be several times too big for it, and though it was bad-like and house elves, there was a quantity of white hair growing out of its large, battle-like ear. Its eyes were bloodshot and watery grey, and its fresh nose was large and rather snot-like. The elf took absolutely no notice of Harry and the rest, acting as though it could not see them. It stuffed, hunchbacked, slow and doggily toward the far end of the room, muttering under its breath all the while in the hoarse, deep voice like Bullfrog. Smells like a drain and a criminal to boot, but she's no better, nasty old blood traitor with her brat messing up mistress's house. Oh my poor mistress, if she knew the scum they have let in her house, what would she say to old creature? Oh, the shame of it, mudbloods and werewolves and traitors and thieves. Poor old creature. What can he do? Hello, creature, said Fred very loudly, closing the door with a snap. The house elf froze in the track, stopped muttering, and they gave a very pronounced and very unconvincing start of surprise. Creature did not see young master, he said, turning around and bowing to Fred. Still facing the carpet, he added, perfectly audible, nasty little brat of a blood traitor it is. Sorry, said George. Didn't catch that last bit. Rachel said nothing, said the elf with a second bow to George, adding in a clear undertone, and there is twins unnatural little beastie they are. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. The elf straightened up, eyeing them all very malevolently and apparently convinced, and they could not hear him, and he continued to mutter. And there is blood standing here bold as brass. Oh, if my mistress knew, oh, how she'd cry. And then there is a new boy. Creature doesn't know his name. What is he doing here? Creature doesn't know. This is Harry Creature, said Hermione tentatively. Harry Potter. Creature's pale eye widened, and he muttered faster and more furiously than ever. The mudblood is talking to Creature as though she is my friend. If Creature's mistress saw him in such a company, oh, what would she say? Don't call her mudblood, said Ron and Ginny together very angrily. It doesn't matter, Hermione whispered. He is not in his right mind. He doesn't know what he is not. Don't kid yourself, Hermione. He knows exactly what he is saying, said Fred, eyeing Creature with a great dislike. Creature was still muttering, his eyes on Harry. Is it true? Is it Harry Potter? Creature can see the scar. It must be the true. That's that boy who stopped the Dark Lord. Creature wondered how he did it. Don't we all, Creature? Said Fred. What do you want anyway? George asked. Creature hug eyes darted onto George. Creator is cleaning, he said evasively. A likely story, said a voice behind Harry. Cyrus had come back. He was glowering at the elf from the doorway. The noise in the hall had abated. Perhaps Mrs. Weasley and Mudunks had moved their argument down into the kitchen. At the sight of Cyrus, Creature flung himself into ridiculous low bow that flattened his shot-like nose on the floor. Stand up straight, said Cyrus impatiently. What are you up to? Creature is cleaning. The elf repeated. Creature lives here to serve noble house of black, and it's getting blacker every day. It's 50, said Cyrus. Master always like his little job, said Creature, bowing again, and continued in an undertone. Master was a nasty and grateful swine who broke his mother's heart. My mother didn't have a heart, Creature, Cyrus snapped. She kept herself alive out of pure spite. Creature bowed again and said, Whatever master say. The muttered furiously, Master is not fit to wipe slime from his mother's brood. Oh, my poor mistress, what would she say if she saw Creature serving him? How she hated him! What a disappointment he was! I ask you what you were up to, said Cyrus coldly. Every time you show up pretending to be cleaning, you sneak something off your room so we can't throw it out. Creature would never move anything from its proper place in Master's house, said the elf, then turned very fast. Mistress would never forgive Creature if the tapestry was thrown out. 7 centuries it's been in the family. Creature must save it. Creature will not let Master and or traitors and the brats destroy it. I thought it might be that, said Cyrus, casting a disdainful look at the opposite wall. She'll have put another parchment sting charm on the back of it. I don't doubt, but if I can get rid of it, I certainly will. Now, go away, creature. It seemed that creature did not dare disobey or direct order. Nevertheless, the look he gave Cyrus as he surfed out past him was riddled of deepest looting and muttered all the way out of the room. Come back from Azkaban, ordering creature around. Oh, my poor mistress, what will she say if she saw the house now? Scum living in it, her treasure thrown out. She swore he was no son of her, and he's back. They say he's a murderer too. Keep muttering. I will be the murderer, said Cyrus irritably, and he slammed the door shut on the elf. Cyrus, he's not right in the head, said Harmony playfully. I don't think he realized we can hear him. He's been alone too long, said Cyrus, taking mad orders from my mother's portrait and talking to himself. But he was always a foul little. If you just set him free, said Harmony hopefully, maybe he can't set him free. He knows too much about the order, said Cyrus curtly, and anyway, the shock would kill him. You suggest him that he leaves his house. See how he takes it. Cyrus walked across the room where the tapestry creature had been taking to protect hung the length of the wall. Harry and the other followed. The tapestry looked immensely old. It was faded and looked as though daisies had crawled in the places. Nevertheless, the golden thread with which he was embroidering still glittering brightly enough to show them a sprawling family tree dating back as far as Harry could tell to the Middle Age. Large world At the very top of the tapestry, the noble and the most ancient house of the Black Rogers for "You are not on here," said Harry after scanning the bottom of the tree. "I used to be here," said Cyrus, pointing on a small, round, charred hole in the tapestry, rather like a cigarette burn. "My sweet old mother blasted me off after I ran from the house. He just quite found me muttering the story under his breath. You ran away from home?" "When I was about 16," said Cyrus. "I had had enough." "Where did you go?" asked Harry, staring at him. "Your dad's place," said Cyrus. "Your grandparents were really good about it. They sort of adopted me as a second son." "Yeah, I camped out at your dad's during the school holidays. And then, when I was 17, I got a place of my own. My uncle Alfred had left me a decent bit of gold. He's been wiped off her too, that's probably why. Anywhere after that, I looked after myself. I was always welcome at Mr. and Mrs. Porter's for Sunday lunch though." "But why did you leave?" Cyrus smiled bitterly and ran a hand through his hair, long, unkempt hair. "Because I hated the whole lot of them. My parents, with their pure blood mania, convinced that to be a black made you particularly royal. My idiot brother soft enough to believe them. That's him." Sarah jabbed a finger at the very bottom of a tree at the name Nicholas Black. A date of death, some 50 years previously, followed the death of Bert. "He was younger than me," said Cyrus, "and a much better son, as I was constantly reminded." "But he died," said Harry. "Yeah," said Cyrus. "Stupid idiot. He joined the Death Eaters." "You are kidding." "Come on, Harry, haven't you seen enough of this house to tell what kind of wizard my family were?" said Cyrus testily. "Were your parents Death Eaters as well?" "No, no, no. But believe me, they thought Voldemort had the right idea. They were all for the purification of the Wizardian race, getting rid of Muggle born and having pure blood in charge. They weren't alone either. There were quite a few people before Voldemort shone his true color who thought he had the right idea about things. They got cold feet when they saw what he was prepared to do to get power, though. But I bet my parents thought Regulus was a little hero for joining up. At first, was he killed by an orator?" Harry asked tentatively. "Oh no," said Cyrus. "No, he was murdered by Voldemort or on Voldemort's order. More likely, I doubt Regulus was ever important enough to be killed by Voldemort in person from what I found out after he did. It got in so far, then panicked about what he was being asked to do and tried to back out. Well, you don't just hand it your resignation to Voldemort. It's a lifetime of service of death." "Lunch," said Mrs. Weasley's voice. She was holding her wand high in front of her, balancing a huge tray loaded with sandwiches and cake on its tip. She was very red in face and still looking angry. The other moved over her, eager for some food, but Harry remained with Cyrus, who had bent closer to the tapestry. "I haven't looked at this for years. There is Fenia Nicholas, my great grandfather, see, least popular headmaster Hogwarts ever had, and Arminta Malifaux, cousin of my brother's, tried to force through a ministry bill to make Muggle hunting legal. And dear Aunt Eloda, she started the family tradition of beheading house elves when they got too old to carry tea tray. Of course, anytime the family produced someone halfway decent, they were disowned. I see Tonk isn't on here. Maybe that's why Creature won't take orders from her. He's supposed to do whatever anyone in the family asks him. You and Tonk are related?" Harry asked, surprised. "Oh, yeah, her mother Andromeda was my favorite cousin, said Cyrus, examining the tapestry carefully. No, Andromeda's not on her it look. He pointed to another small round burnt mark between two names, Bellatrix and Narcissa. Andromeda's sisters are still here because they made lovely, respectable, pure blood marriages. But Andromeda married a Mughal burnt eight tongues, so Cyrus mimed blasting the tapestry with a wand and laughed sorely. Harry, however, did not laugh. He was too busy staring at the names to the right of the Andromos burn mark. A double line of gold embroidery linked Narcia Black with Sir Lucius Malfoy, and a single vertical gold line from their names led to the name Draco. You are related to Malfoys. The pure blood families are all interrelated, said Cyrus. If you are only going to let your son and daughter marry pure blood, your choice is very limited. There are hardly any of us left. Molly and I are cousins by marriage, and Arthur's sometime like my second cousin, once removed. But there is no point looking from them on there. If every family was a bunch of mud traitor, it's the Weasleys. But Harry was now looking at the same to the left of Andromeda's burned Bellatrix Black, which was connected to the double line of Rodolph Lestrange. Lestrange, Harry said loudly. The name had stirred some time in his memory. He knew it from somewhere, but from a moment he couldn't think where, though it gave him an odd creeping sensation in the pit of his stomach. They are in a cabin, said Cyrus shortly. Harry looked at his curiosity. Bellatrix and her husband, Rodolph, came with a Barty Crouch Jr., said Cyrus in the same Burke's voice. Rodolph's brother, Ravenstone, was with them too, and Harry remembered he had seen Bellatrix Lestrange inside Dumbledore's pensive, the strange device in which thought and memories could be stored, a tall dark woman and heavy-lidded eyes who was stood at her trial and proclaimed her continuing allegiance to Lord Voldemort, her pride that she had tried to find him after his downfall, and her conviction that she would one day be rewarded for her loyalty. You never said she was your. Does it matter if she's my cousin? Snapped Cyrus. As far as I am concerned, they are not my family. She is certainly not my family. I haven't seen her since I was your age, unless you count a glimpse of her coming in the Azkaban. Do you think I am proud of saving having a relative like her? Sorry, said Harry quickly. I didn't mean. I was just surprised, that's all. It doesn't matter. Don't apologize, Cyrus mumbled at once. He turned away from the trapstay, his hand deep in his pocket. I don't like being back here, he said, staring across the drawing room. I never thought I had stuck in his house again. Harry understood completely. He knew how he would feel it force when he has grown up and thought he was free of place forever to return and live at number 4 Private Drive. It's idle for headquarter, of course, said Silas. My father put every security measure, don't wizard kind on it when he lived here. It's unplottable, so Muggle could never come and call as they had have wanted to, and now Dumbledore aided his protection. You had be hard put to find a safe house anywhere. Dumbledore's secret keeper for the order. You know, nobody can find headquarters unless he tells them personally where it is. That note Moody showed you last night, that was from Dumbledore. Cyrus gave a short, black-like laugh. If my parent could see the use of his being put to now, well, my mother's portrait should give you some idea. He showed for a moment, then sighed. I wouldn't mind if I could just get out occasionally and do something useful. I have asked Dumbledore whether I can escort you to your hearing as Snuffle, obviously, so I can give you a bit of moral support. What do you think? Harry felt as though his stomach had sunk through a dusky carpet. He had not thought about the hearing once since dinner the previous evening. In her excitement of being back with the people he liked best, of hearing everything that was going on, he had completely flawed his mind at Cyrus's word. However, the crushing sense of dread returned to him. He stared at Hermione and the Weasleys all tucking into their sandwiches and thought how he would feel if they went back to Hogwarts without him. Don't worry, Cyrus said. Harry looked up and realized that Cyrus had been watching him. I'm sure they are going to clear you. There is definitely something in the international statute of sorcery about being allowed to use magic to save your own life. But if they do expel me, said Harry quietly, can I come back here and live with you? Cyrus smiled sadly. Well, see, I'd feel a lot better about the hearing if I knew I didn't have to go back to Dursley's. Harry pressed him. They must be bad if you prefer this place, said Cyrus gloomily. Hurry up, you two, or there won't be any food left, Mrs. Weasley called. Cyrus heaved another great sigh, cast a dark look at the tapestry, and he and Harry went to join the others. Harry tried his best not to think about the hearing while they emptying the glass cabinet that afternoon. Fortunately for him, it was a job that required a lot of concentration, as many of objects in there seemed to very reluctant to leave their dusky sleeves. Cyrus sustained a bad bite from a silver snuff box, which second his bitten had developed an unpleasant crusty covering like a tough brown glow. It's okay, he said, examining the hand with interest before tapping it lightly with his wand and restored the skin to its normal. Must be vodka powder in there. He threw the box aside into the sack where they were depositing the debris from the cabinet. Harry saw George wrap his own hand carefully in the cloth movement. Later, he sneaked the box into his already doxy-filled pocket. They found unpleasant looking silver instrument. Something had many-legged pair of tweezers which scuttled up Harry's arm like a spider when he picked up and attempted to puncture his skin. Cyrus says it had smashed it with a heavy book entitled Nature's Nobility, a Wizardian genealogy. There was a musical box, what emptied the fainted, sinister, tickling tune when wound, and they all found themselves becoming curiously weak and sleepy until Guinea had the sense to slam the lid shut. Also, a heavy lock that none of them could open, a number of ancient seals, and in a dusty box of Order of Merlin First Class that had been awarded to Cyrus' grandfather for services to the ministry. It means he gave them a lot of gold, said Cyrus contemptuously, throwing the mirror into the rubbish sack. Several times Cratchit sadly into the room and attempted to smuggle things away under his loincloth, muttering horrible curses every time they caught him at it. When Cyrus wrested a large golden ring bearing a black crest from his grip, Creature actually burst into furious tears and left the room sobbing under his breath and calling Cyrus' name Harry had never heard before. It was my father, said Cyrus, throwing the ring into the bag. Creature wasn't quite as devoted to him as to ask mother, but I still caught him snogging a pair of my father's old trousers last week. Mrs. Weasley kept them all working very hard over the next few days. The drawing room took 3 days of decontment. Finally, The only desirable thing left in were the tapestry of the black family tree, which resisted all their attempts to remove it from the wall, and the rattling written desk. Moody had not dropped by headquarters yet, so they could not be sure what was inside it. They moved from the drawing room to the dining room on the ground floor, where they found Spider large as saucer lurking in the dress. Ron left the room, hurried to make a cup of tea, and did not return for an hour and a half. The china was bored and black creased, and motto was all thrown unceremoniously into a sack by Cyrus, and the same fate met a set of gold photographs in tarnished silver frame, all of whom occupant squealed shrilly as the glass covering them smashed. Snape might refer to their work at cleaning, but in Harry's opinion they were really wagging war on the house, which was putting up very good fight aided and bettered by creature. The house elf kept appearing where they were congregated, his muttering becoming more and more offensive as he attempted to remove anything he could from the rubbish sack. Cyrus went as far as he treated him with cloth by creature, fixed him with a watery stay, and said, Master must do as masters wish before turning away and muttering very loudly. But master will not turn creature away, no, because creature knows what they are up to. Oh yes, he is plotting against the Dark Lord, yes, and with this mudblood and traitor and scum, at which Cyrus ignored Harmony protests, seized Creature by the back of the loincloth and threw him bodily from the room. The doorbell rang several times a day, which was a cue for Cyrus' mother to start shrieking again and for Harry and the other to attempt to eavesdrop on the visitor, though they gleaned very little from the brief gleams and snatches of conversation they were able to sneak before Mrs. Weasley recalled them to their task. Snape flitted in and out of the houses several times more, though to Harry's relief, them never become face to face. He also caught sight of his transfiguration teacher, Professor McGonagall, looking very odd in a muggle dress and caught, though she also seemed to be busy to linger. Sometimes, however, the visitors stayed to help. Tom joined them for a memorable afternoon in which they found a murderous old ghoul lurking in the upstairs toilet, and Lupin, who was staying in the house with Cyrus, but who left it for long period to do mysterious work for the order, helped them repair a grandfather clock that had developed the unpleasant habit of shooting heavy bolts at passers-by. Mudunks redeemed himself slightly in Mrs. Weasley's eye by recovering Ron from an ancient set of purple robes that had tried to strangle him when he removed them from their wardrobe, despite the fact that he was still sleeping badly, still having dreams about corridor and locked door that made his scared pickle. Harry was managing to have fun for the first time all summer. As long as he was busy, he was happy when the action abated. However, whenever he dropped his guard and lay exhausted in the bed, watching blurred shadows move across the ceiling as though of looming monster, hearing returned to him, fear jabber at his inside like needle as he wondered what was going to happen to him was expelled. The idea was so terrible that he did not dare voice it loud, not even to Ron and Hermione, who thought he often saw them whispering together and casting anxious look in his direction. Followed his lead in not mentioning it. Sometime he could not prevent his imagination showing him a faceless ministry official who was snapping in one in two and ordering him back to the Dursleys. But he would not go. He was determined on that. He would come back here to Grimmauld place and live with Cyrus. He felt as though the bricks had dropped into his mouth. When Mrs. Weasley turned to him during dinner on Wednesday evening and said quickly, I have ignored you best clothes for tomorrow morning. Harry, I want you to wash your hair tonight too. A good first impression can work wonders. Ron, Hermione, Fred and George and Ginny all stopped talking and looked over at him. Harry nodded and tried to keep eating with chops, but his mouth had become dry. He could not chew. How am getting there? He asked Mrs. Weasley, trying to sound unconcerned. Arthur's taking you to the work with him, said Mrs. Weasley gently. Mr. Weasley smiled encouragingly at Harry across the table. You can wait in my office until it's time for the hearing, he said. Harry looked over at Cyrus, but before he could ask a question, Mrs. Weasley had answered it. Professor Dumbledore doesn't think it's a good idea for Cyrus to go with you, and I must say I think it's quite right, said Cyrus through clenched teeth. Mrs. Weasley pursed her lips. When did Dumbledore tell you that? Harry said, staring at Cyrus. He came last night when you were in the bed, said Mr. Weasley. Cyrus stared moodily at the potato with his fork. Harry dropped his own eyes to his plate, thought that Dumbledore had been in the house on the eve on his hearing and not asked him to see him made him feel if that were possible even worse.